last week we started talking about something really deeper than the basic mythologies that we've considered, and are very familiar to us. Whether you see these things on television or whatever, you're familiar with basic Greek mythology. But there's another part of it that we discussed last week that came out of a city in Greece called Eleusia, E-L-U-S-I-A. And these were things called the Eleusinian Mysteries. Now, what makes it so interesting is that they took these things and they broke them into two parts. They had the lesser, what they call the lesser mysteries, and the greater mysteries. And whoever these people were, they really dove deep into, basically, people would translate a particular myth and attribute it to, it's representing a season, or it's representing something in the sky, or something of nature. But that was fine for the lesser, but for the greater, these people connected deeply the invisible world, the mind, and so walking there, you get a very deep understanding that there was somebody who was alive and working at that time who were presenting these things in such a coded fashion, and basically very close to the way we've been talking and sharing with each other here. And contained in the Eleusinian Mysteries was the mystery of Pluto. Now, Pluto becomes, over and over again we've discussed this, Pluto becomes very interesting to us because on March the 15th, 1999, it moves out of the orbit of Neptune. Pluto and Charon take their place deep into as the doorway to the next world. I think we make too much of the power of individual, planets, and like Mike said, this may not even be a planet, which is not the point. The point is the configuration of all of these things, and how do they change the balance of the electromagnetism that impacts the Earth, and if so, and if it changes the angle of entry, does that then cause a change in the consciousness? Well, it would appear that electrical stimulation and electrical impulse does change consciousness, and I think we've proved that over the last few weeks. We've talked about situations where they did animal testing and so forth, and by causing a wire in a particular part of the brain and stimulating it with electricity, they could change behavior. I think the most graphic one was the one where they did it with the bull, and the matador stood there without anything, and when the bull started running at him, he pushed a button on his belt and the bull stopped. And they had touched the part of the brain of the bull that said, calm down and, cool it. And it worked. So in that type of a situation, could it be possible that electrical stimulation to a particular part of the brain causes a change in behavior? That basically, that's the whole concept, although maybe not expressed so, that's the whole concept of astrology. Stimulation to the brain from an external source at a particular time that causes a behavioral pattern. All right? It seems like it could be a logical and a reasonable concept. So when we talk about Pluto on March 15th going to move, into a different position, what's interesting about it is by moving in a different position, that causes an entire change in the configuration of all the planets and constellations. And then do we set up a change in the way the electrical stimulant hits the brain. And so I'm not saying that because Pluto is moving here, big deal. But what I am saying, number one, it's a big deal because it fulfills the myth. That's interesting. But the second part of it is that it starts to change the configuration of these things, the location of these things, and does that indeed cause a change in the angle of light? Now, so the mystery of Pluto in the Eleusinian Mysteries is the abduction by Pluto of a woman called Persephone. Persephone is her name. And her mother's name is Ceres, Ceres. And the story in these mysteries is that Persephone is out picking flowers. You know, you can see the birds are chirping, the gentle breezes are blowing, the brook is babbling, and Ethel's babbling, and, you know, all this stuff is going on. Well, then suddenly, while Persephone is picking flowers, the earth opens, and out of the earth, riding on this chariot, is Pluto coming out of the underworld. Now, interesting here, because what we have is, the fact that it's coming out of the earth is this cataclysmic event, which is then going to scoop up Persephone and drag her kicking and screaming down into the underworld. It's interesting. When you talk about changes, and I've always talked to people who's kind of the earth changes, because I like to see documentation from other than people who have vested interests in putting forth a particular idea, a concept. And I did the other day. So we talk about changes in the other. I was watching on CBS News or one of those. They were talking about, they were keeping an eye on a particular iceberg up in Alaska, I guess, where these things are. And this iceberg has lost 20% of its mass. And they're really concerned because they say that the global warming, which is caused by the pollutants in the air, could be causing this to such an extent that if these tremendous icebergs lose their mass and become water, it's going to then raise the levels of the ocean and so forth, and then you can have some problem. Not next week, not necessarily next year, maybe not in 20 or 30 years, but I don't know when or how or what, but there is definitely something going on that's causing a change. So here then, in the Eleusinian Mysteries, here's Persephone out picking flowers. Pluto comes out of the earth splits open. Pluto comes out of the earth, grabs Persephone, drags her down, kicking and screaming, into the underworld, and makes her queen of his underworld palace. So here is this young lady whose dwelling place is in the light, in the warmth, in the beauty, in the color, suddenly becomes queen of the underworld where everything is death and dark and cold. See? Now, this could, if you're going to, what I find interesting about this is, you may not want to take this seriously, but see, let me go. You may not want to take this seriously, but the reason that I think you should give it some credibility, and I give it credibility, is the fact that these people who wrote this were the ones who told you about Pluto and Charon thousands of years before your scientists discovered Pluto and Charon. I mean, coincidence? Call it what you will. You say, well, we found these things, so they named it after Pluto and Charon. The Pluto part I could buy. I mean, we found a planet that was the furthest one out, the doorway to the next door. We'll call it Pluto. Why would you do that? Well, because that's part of the myth. I could buy that. That's just say, well, they just named a planet after a myth, so what's the big deal? That is not in and of itself a big deal. The big deal comes 48 years later when they find this little gray thing orbiting it. You have a picture of it. And the guy, McNeil, who discovered it, wanted to name the little gray thing after his wife, and his wife's name was Sharon. So it winds up being Pluto, and of course somebody said, well, Sharon, and here they are. 2,000-3,000 years after these people wrote about it, we find them right where they're supposed to be. Right where they're supposed to be. That to me is a very, very, very significant thing. And if that is true, and it is, and you can't deny, nobody in the world can deny that they wrote about Pluto and Charon, and then 2,000 years later we found Pluto and Charon in the sky. So if that's true, then can you drop the rest of the story and say, well, that part we believe, but the rest of it, it's a myth. Well, it's a whole is a myth, but it's all then takes on an air of credibility about it, and I have to look and say, well, what is the story of Persephone? Pluto coming out of the ground and dragging her down to the underworld. It could be an omen for us, because what you're trying to think of was when Pluto and Charon assumed the position on March the 15th. What is going to be the change? Well, now, March the 16th, everybody's not going to run around, crazy. I mean, I don't think. I mean, who knows? But you would think that this is a sign of a change in the same way that, the sun is going to be in a different position in April than it is now, and it's going to be the sign of a change, isn't it? There's going to be a change. You're going to see little robins come back. You're going to see buds come on the ground and the trees and so forth and so on, and it's a sign that there's a change of the season. But what we lose track of is the fact that when we see the change of a season starting, you can smell it in the air, spring is coming, you can feel it, spring is coming, the change of the season, that's the season of the earth. You live in it and you accept it. But what you don't understand, many people don't understand, is that your universe has a season exactly the same. You have a season of 12 months, 30 days a month. The universe has a season of 12 ages, 2160 years in age, and that's the same exact thing. So it's a change of the season. Now when the sun is in a different position, April comes, you go into spring, you have a different season. But when these things get in a different position up in the universe, this age changes and you have a whole different season that affects you, it affects your mind, it affects consciousness of all things. And so it's very, very important. So we would say, well then what would it be like? What is going to happen? If we establish there's a logical basis for us to look at this intelligently, scientifically, and maturely as adult people, and not consider it as, most people say, well that's a myth, saying, well, it's not true. A myth means it is true. You just have to figure out what the myth is talking about that's true. But it has to do with either a scientific or anatomical, which is bodily, or astronomical, which is universal truth. These things are real. So then what will be the change? How will things change? I mean, how are things going to be different, you say? Well, it could be a coming of a time when these things, which are the mundane things that we do every day, symbolized by Persephone picking flowers, suddenly find the spirit or inner nature, symbolized by her, crashing. I mean, confusion, delusion. Is Y2K part of this? I get a lot of people writing on the internet saying, what do you think about Y2K? I mean, I think about Y2K like you do. Well, who knows? But it's there, and I see very intelligent people grappling with the potential for some real problems with it. Well, is that part of the confusion? It's not necessarily orchestrated by any god anywhere saying, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get all their computers to crash, that'll fix them. It's just an evolution of what happens. How do all of these things happen? And this, quite incidentally, is happening in the year 2000 when, according to our scientists and astronomers, supernova will then be lighting up on fire and causing stimulation into the electromagnetic. I mean, all of these things, I'm not standing here saying Pluto and Charon, because March 15th this is going to happen, this is a big deal. What I'm saying to you is Pluto and Charon is one part of it. Supernova 1988 7A is another part of it. Pegasus is another part of it. Fornax is another part of it. And all of these things then come together and they weave this great electromagnetic web in the universe, and they become part of it, and they start to change the way we exist on this earth. So then we would say that Persephone, who symbolizes the spirit or the inner part, our personalities, suddenly is dragged into the depths, the pits, confusion. Many people experience something like this. We were talking about it around Christmas time. A lot of people go into deep depressions around Christmas time. And it's not because of jingle bells and holly and Santa Claus and all that. It has nothing to do with that. It's because of an alignment. It's because of an alignment, a unique alignment that occurs at that time, which causes electromagnetic fields, which in turn cause some people to be receptive to it and go into a depression. So the soul, if you want to call it that, and let's address that. I mean, there's nothing in you called a soul. There is just nothing there called a soul. That is another part of the invisible realm of the subatomic structure. A soul is a subatomic structure. an invisible structure that somehow has a capacity to absorb in and of itself those things, which then become your feelings, your personality. One of the strangest things that I've heard, and I saw this, I wanted to talk to you about it, because it has to do with medicine, has to do with hospitals and so forth. But what we've been talking about, the true you that's located inside of your body. And they have this phenomenon going on in operating rooms now, where people who are being operated on are awake during the entire operation, although they're out cold. People who can actually feel the cut going across wherever they're being cut. This one lady said she had something taken, in her abdomen. She actually felt them. She saw him pick up the scalpel, and the guy was singing as he was cutting her abdomen open. He was singing "Born Free," and she heard him. But she didn't feel pain, but she felt it. She felt it, and she said, here she was. She said, here I was, inside of here. I couldn't move. I couldn't talk. I couldn't move my eyes or anything, but I could feel and see everything going on. And in fact, she even heard the doctor start kidding around about her anatomy. And about, she was endowed and, and so forth. And she heard, but yet how could this be? And so what anesthesiologists are getting together now, because this has happened to other people where they, it's really, and anesthesiologists are getting together to try to do something about the brainwave activity when a person is under anesthesia. They're under anesthesia. They're out cold. There's no, everything is being regulated by the anesthesiologist, yet the person is wide awake. But not wide awake. That thing, that light inside there is cognizant of everything. It's a perfect, I think, description of what we're talking about, that there is a part of us that is real and is alive and is deep inside here, which is sensing all these. Now, I just thought it was a curious thing. So here then, what we have is Persephone representing that part of us that's inside here. And your true home and Persephone's true home is in light. It's in this realm. Somehow the next big thing that I have to do is be able to convey and to try to communicate what I'm talking about, and really get you to understand this thing, because it is so hard. Because as far as you are concerned, you take a look in the mirror and say, that's me. And it has nothing to do with you. It's simply this suit you're wearing. It's the car you're driving during this particular little adventure. It is not you. Any more than how many cars have you owned in your lifetime? And all of them are in a junk heap, and they're all, but you just get rid of them and you get another car. And basically it's the same concept. You are this particular light, this particular matter. But this thing, which is subatomic, has a capacity to absorb, has a capacity to absorb existence, has a capacity to absorb intelligence. In some way, I was talking to Mark a few weeks ago, when we were talking about, and when he was saying that all this chaos in the universe, and all this stuff, bashing and exploding and fire, and then horrendous stuff going on, and how in the world, how could even anything exist, in all of this total chaos that is the universe? But yet at the basis of every single bit of that chaos, there's one thing, and that's consciousness. It's always there. There's a consciousness. And this is what we're talking about. It's like Rene Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. I exist. And my whole concept is just to exist, to be in existence. So here then, your true home is this higher realm, and I don't want to get religious or spiritual at it, so let's stay away from that. But in the subatomic thing that you are, your true home is connected with something outside of your body. And that's why this feeling of moving in that direction. Your true home is free from the bondage of all material concept, but here you are trapped inside of a head. You're inside of this head. You can't get out. You're inside of this body. There's nothing you can do about it. And it sometimes becomes very dark and foreboding. Very often, sometimes it becomes bright, but sometimes it becomes dark and foreboding. So the Eleusinian mysteries, then, what we're talking about, portray your human. Now, understand this. Listen to what I'm saying here. This is the way they looked at things. Your human or physical nature is a tomb, a false and impermanent thing, the source of all suffering and sorrow. And that as you are laid in this tomb, when you come down and enter into the body, then the time will come and you wait to be able to resurrect and rise out of the tomb, which is your very own body. Plato described the body as a sepulcher, a tomb. And that's very important when we consider supernova 1987A. Because if you look on the stuff that I gave you, you got supernova over here and a direct line to Fornax, which is the constellation here. And Fornax is the sepulcher, the vault, the furnace, the tomb, say. So the fire in your brain goes from the pineal gland along stria pinealis to the fornix, lights the fornix, and then in that fire appears the fourth, which is that subatomic, whatever we call it, God, spirit, whatever you want to call it from a religious standpoint. And in the sky, the fire from supernova travels along the line to fornax. So you have this thing going on inside of your brain, which causes a microcosmic type of change in you, and then the thing going on in the universe, which causes a macrocosmic type of change in all of us, in all of the whole world and all of the whole universe, you see. So the Eleusinian mysteries, then. And don't think, just think, the name of the town was Eleusia, but think of these people. These are strange dudes who were doing this stuff. I mean, you had people who were interpreting mythology, and everybody said, I think that's what this means, and they would say, yeah, you're right, yeah, goodbye. But they knew there was something much deeper to it than what was being conveyed. They explained the nature of the human problem, the agony of you. You are trapped inside of your head. You are surrounded by everything made by your family. Your problems were created for you from the time you were born. You were given genetics and chromosomes and all of this stuff to make you look like you do, to make you feel a part of this tribe. And then when you were delivered by the doctor somewhere, then they all descended upon you. They picked you up. They took you to a place. They initiated you into the cult that they were part of, and they raised you to be part of this cult. And then all of a sudden, you find yourself that you have a personality, you have an appearance, and so forth and so on. And yet, inside, you sometimes, somehow, somewhere along the way felt you didn't belong and you needed out. What was it? What was it that was telling you that this was strange to you, that was foreign to you, that there was something else? You've all gone through it. You've all gone through these churches, and either you genuflected or you said, praise the Lord, and hallelujah, and you held hands and sang songs, and you did all of this stuff, and people fell on the floor, and other people were throwing water and smoke and all of this stuff, and you said, oh, this is wonderful. This is the day that the Lord, and then all of a sudden in the middle of it, you said, what the hell what is this? What's crazy? This doesn't make any sense. And so then something inside of you was saying you're not a part of it. Something was inside of you said, there is something wrong about this. And it started to pull you. You're surrounded by everything made by your family, and the problem is you have always been unable to express yourself as the individual light that you are. Because what the Eleusinian mystery said, our problem is we have accepted the limitations and the illusions of the human environment. This was said thousands of years ago by these strange people. We have accepted the limitations and the illusions of the human environment. You can't do this. No, don't get involved in that. No, just follow us. Just listen to me. You don't want to do that because you'll open your mind to devils. You'll open your mind to demons. You'll get in trouble. Stay away from that. And you've always got these people. And before you know it, you were surrounded and inundated, totally brainwashed to the point that your individuality was gone. You as a light no longer ceased to exist. You as a light ceased to exist. And now you were part of them. And when they said stand up, you stood up. When they said sit down, you sit down. When they said you move around like this, and then they put you in the army, and they said turn this way, and you turned that way, and you went here, and they said go to eat, and you all went to eat, and this is it. You were nothing but an ant, a tribe. And not only did we do it, we loved it. We carried flags for it, and we saluted for it, and we were having our total individuality, our total humanness destroyed, taken away from us. Our identity was gone. The most amazing and the most wonderful thing, the first thing I knew where I had made the break, and I had this crazy religious, I was raised Catholic, and I had this crazy medallion that we used to wear. And I'd get the biggest kick out of going to family picnics and, with the aunts and uncles. I didn't have many, but I used to go there, and my mother would freak because I'd wear this thing which wasn't, it was a Catholic. Don't wear that, Not in front of Uncle Vincent and all these people, because these people are afraid, what is that? What are you? And it was a great thing. It was my first taste of just, shoving it in everybody's face, and I loved it. Because, I just somehow had to scream that I don't want to be, I'm not part of your tribe anymore. I'm not part of your group. I'm out of here. I'm by myself. And it was so wonderful. And that feeling within me has allowed me then to look at anything. I wish I could have, I showed John, I got an email last week. I wish I could show you this. And the guy, whoever wrote it, from wherever, I can't remember where it came from, but the gist of the email was, who are you? How do you know all of this? And I've read all of these, I've gone all through the websites, all over the internet, studying this stuff, but I never, ever saw it. And then he repeated, who are you? Where do you come from? Should we tell him? But you see, the point then is, it's just I am free to be wrong, I am free to be right. It isn't make any difference. I don't have to agree, and you don't have to agree, and this is the emblem, if you would, of a free spirit that can find. Now we can find it because we've got nobody telling us, oh, you can't look at that. It's like telling Dr. Salk, who invented the Salk vaccine that cured polio, oh, you can't put that under a microscope, Dr. Salk, because our church doesn't allow it. If you had told him that, then kids would still be crippled. And because of the fact that the church says you can't look at that, people are still crippled because they haven't been able to find themselves. The mysteries went right to the heart of the human relationship. And what the Eleusinians taught was it's totally up to you. You're no better off in this body or out of the body if you haven't found the center path that connects you with the mother light. You've got to overcome a desire to be part of the system instead of being part of the light. Please, and when I say you've got to overcome desire, it doesn't mean the desire is to have a nice car or a new house or go to dinner or go to Atlantic City or go to a show. These are fun things. These are things you should have desires for. There's nothing wrong with that. That's fun. That's what keeps you going. That's what makes life exciting. It is the desire to please them. It is the desire to be part of them, to think like them, to be part of the mob. There has to be the end of desire for you to be connected with everybody else. There has to be simply your willingness to drop and be part of yourself. And think the way you want to think. Act the way you want to act. Remember Jacob in the Bible? In the Bible, he struggled with a man, which meant he was struggling with himself. And remember, the man put his thigh out. Well, the thigh is a symbol of desire metaphysically because of where it's located. And when that desire was put out, Jacob ceased to be, and he became Israel. Isis, Ra, and El. In other words, Isis, that spirit, Ra, the mind, El, God, three together. Everything was then fulfilled. Why? Because he said, I'm not part of this. I don't need to be part of you anymore. I see people come on television, religious people come on television, and other people are in the audience, and they're all standing up, and you become an ant. You give yourself over to becoming an ant. You're just everybody moving in one direction, and nobody's thinking, anything unique. And that's the destruction of life, and that's what the Aleutians were trying to tell. It's this idea of trying to be part of them, to be afraid to step out of line because of them, to be afraid to think in terms of light and the cosmos because of them. I saw a guy on television last week. It was a religious guy, and he had a blackboard on there, and he said, well, you got to be careful, these people, they're talking about aliens, and they're talking about outer space. What is there? Is there no space? It doesn't exist? And what do you mean aliens? They're just neighbors. How about that? How about we don't call them aliens? How about you call them neighbors? People who live someplace else. But he's got a problem with this because it counters his superstitions from the Middle Ages. So what I'm telling you now is that Pluto is ready to break out of the ground. Now listen very carefully what I'm saying. Pluto, and remember I'm talking in symbols. I'm not talking, there's no, probably the first thing you're thinking of is Disney, and Pluto's come running and grab you by the back of the neck. But Pluto is ready to break out of the ground and carry those who are asleep to his lower kingdom. That means a collapse of many of the things that we've cherished and held on to, because a cleansing is coming upon the earth. So what happens? When you clean things, the room gets cleaned, but it's not good news for the dirt. But it has to be. To the Eleusinian mysteries, coming down as light into the physical world, entrance into the fetus into your mother's womb was entering into the tomb of the world of the dead. And the only true birth was that of the spiritual light within, rising out of the womb of your own fleshly nature. In other words, you have to be born again, but born of the light. Born out of the left into the right, out of that which is the lower into that which is the higher. That's why the Bible said in 1 Peter, you are a chosen generation. They've called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. The Bible, this book and all the books talk about light. The whole thing is talking about light, 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 light. And nobody understands. Nobody has ever stopped to think, what could that possibly be talking about? Could it be talking about that which scientists and physicists know, what light and the properties of light and the magnetism of light and the changes and so forth that it brings upon the earth? When one is ruled by Pluto, and this is all in symbolisms, you're ruled by the dead. And that's the problem that comes down to the heads of people now, as Pluto and Chiron come into position that will herald in the dawning of this new light, this new consciousness, this whole new paradigm. I mean, what you're watching on television, when you look at this country, I mean, this is, the country, leaders, this is the biggest big shot country in the entire planet. And watch them on television. They are actually sitting there with suits and ties, and this woman is on talking about, who touched who and whether they didn't, and I don't know if I signed this, he didn't say nothing. I mean, this is going on for weeks and weeks. The entire thing is consumed in this. And you say, well, how could this possibly be? And have you noticed, when nothing's going on, every little thing that happens around the world is important. Now Monica's here, and you never even heard about anything going on anywhere. You don't know whether people are getting killed or whether there's plagues anywhere. You don't know anything. The whole thing gets turned upside down. And it's just the beginning. And it's a change. The whole paradigm changes. The way we think and what we do changes. And then, when this is over, and it's almost over, then the bad feelings are going to, these people are really going to get ticked off at one another. And then you start to self-destruct. You have this self-destruct. You have a situation here where you have one man who's accused of something. He's a part of this cult. And the other cult says, aha, he's bad. His cult said, no, it's not that bad. So it has nothing to do with whether the man did anything good or bad. It has to do with which cult he belonged. If he was in the cult that had more votes, he's okay. If he's in the cult that doesn't have so many votes, he's dead. Has nothing to do. If you've watched on television, every time they vote, this cult votes. And this cult votes. And all in this cult vote this way, and all of this cult vote that way. It has nothing to do. And they'll all stand up talking about the rule of law. It has to do with the rule of cults, what group you belong to. That's what it is. Right? But and those of you who are pulled out of these cults can look at this and say, my God, here's a perfect example. This is a trial. And they got the cult leader, the Supreme Court guy, sitting with his robes up on the top seat with golden stripes on. And he's administering while these two cults vote this way. So the silliness then becomes, very apparent to those of you who look and say, well, what is right and what is wrong? And obviously it can never be solved where you have groups or cults. Only individuals in their heart can determine. It has to come from within you. But do you see, the Democrats can't do anything, the Republicans can't do anything, because they've got to go along with their cults. They can't come together and sit down and say, no, wait a minute here. Let's take a look at this, and let's eliminate any connection to any groups or cults, because they can't, because they're part of a cult. I'm a part of the Republican cult, you're part of the Democrat cult, I vote this way, you vote that way. It has nothing to do with whether it's right or wrong. And then what happens? They all come and the cults run for election and we all go out and elect them. I'm voting, And so then we become part of the whole disaster. And you look at it and say, gosh, I look at all of the people that have died. I say, all the people on the earth. There was a time 100 years ago when you weren't here and there was a whole other bunch on the earth. They're all gone. Now here are you, and you're going through the same thing. You'll be gone, and then 100 years from now, there'll be a whole other bunch sitting, and they'll be sitting in chairs like this, and they'll say, there was a time 100 years ago when people were... And what has been accomplished? Nothing, because all the cults continued to flourish until then Pluto comes out of the ground and grabs you by the neck. And that's the change. And it's not a change. There is no guy named Pluto coming out of the ground. There is no ground splitting up. It's an evolution. It's a change in consciousness. It's a whole new direction in the way of thinking. And it causes this type of thing to collapse. So now is the time when the universe will feel Pluto's power. And I don't mean that Pluto per se. If it's a planet or if it's a hunk of ice or if it's a pizza, whatever. We're talking in symbolism. It is the power of upheaval. It is attributed also to Uranus. It is attributed to Aquarius. It is a season and it's a change and it's a time of upheaval. And I'll tell you something interesting that we have discussed when the angle of light comes into the fetus, and somebody provided us with a book to show us that the pineal gland of the brain forms in the fetus at about the 3rd month. And at that point, the light then can collapse as a particle. And the Eleusinian mysteries believed that as all these light streams came down looking for a body to enter into, that the invisible worlds were closest to the earthly sphere at midnight, and at midnight they would slip into material existence. So my greatest desire then, and my greatest hope for you, is that you're following this twisting pathway upward out of the abyss of your earthly lower part into finding this light. But let me tell you something. And I don't care how you do it, but I can see evidences of it here. I can, on a Tuesday night, meditation, a handful of people. This is not important to most people. It really is not. If you really believed what I was talking about, it doesn't mean that you have to come here. And I'd please back away from it. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. Because that's part of another cult. That's a cult again. If I say, well, you've got to be here Tuesday night or you're not going to be. That's not true. But what I'm saying, it's indicative of me, of the fact that even though we have gotten to a point of scientifically saying this is true and something is coming down here, I get the feeling, and I could be wrong, that most of us really are not bothering with it. And that scares me. Because, what does it say? It says, in 1 Corinthians 13, for now we see through a glass darkly, now I know in part, but then I shall know face to face. Face to face. And going way back in the ancient documents, Jacob in Genesis said, I've seen God face to face. And I'm going to call this place Peniel. But so otherwise, what are you going to do? I can guarantee you, I'm a prophet. I'm the great prophet. And the great prophet says, you will get older and weaker and weaker. And then all of a sudden, like a puff of smoke, you ever see that? And the smoke is gone, and you're gone. And you missed it. You had all these years, and you missed it. It's like people on television, they're going to church. And everybody in your family has gone to church. And they're all dead. And they missed it. Because of religion, people, for the most part, are unaware of this opportunity to unfold and reveal their immortal, invisible self. This is your opportunity now. I'm not talking about next year or 10 years. I'm saying this is your opportunity now. And this is what those mysteries are all about. Thousands of years ago, they spoke of unfolding the immortal, invisible self. And now, with Aquarius, this unfolding is taking place. Now it's happening. The very fact that you're curious about it shows me that you have risen to a higher plane, or you wouldn't be sitting here. There was no way. Or you could take these people. Just imagine if you weren't here. Or say we had a balcony here. You're all sitting in the balcony, and we fill up this whole bottom part with all people from Fork and River and put them in here. They would be out this door in a second. They'd be nuts. We couldn't deal with it. It's like listening to somebody from a foreign country, because I am. And I know that. And it's difficult. When you think that way, I ask you to consider these mysteries. Here is an opportunity to unfold your immortal, invisible self. Nothing in the universe is more important to me than seeing that happen to you. But how do I impress this upon you? Because inside of you, and forget who's sitting next to you, because you don't have to confess to anybody, or you don't even let anybody see you. Inside of all of us, inside of you, there is a darkness that constantly grabs at you. Constantly. And the darkness is of your own making, in legion with your family and the social institutions of this earth. It is going nowhere, but we cling to it. It is like a car racing towards a brick wall, about to have an accident, and you having an opportunity to jump out, deciding, nah, I want to stay with everybody else, and crack up. What you have called the New Age, which to me, in many instances, is as bad or worse than fundamentalism. I mean, some of it is bizarre stuff that you just can't even take rationally. But what it basically is a searching for your spirit, your life, your true identity. And that's the part played by Ceres. Ceres is Persephone's mother. And she had to wander through the underworld looking for her daughter. Persephone! Persephone! Through all of the dark dungeons and all of the dark places she would look, and she would try to find her. And so what basically this is, your life, your true identity. Whenever you go into meditation, you're Ceres, and you're looking into the dungeon of yourself, and you're trying to find that which is the light, your spirit, to bring it up into the light. And you're calling out, even though you don't use any words, you're calling out, Persephone, Persephone, where are you? Where yourself you're looking for. Where are you? I'm trying to find myself. I'm trying to find this light. I can't be, safe anymore by all of this around me. I've got to get out, and I've got to get up into the light. That was the problem. Now you are so close to finding your daughter, which is the light inside of you. Ceres carried 2 torches through these dark dungeons as she was looking for Persephone, Persephone. And the same torches that you carry here, they were called, one torch was called intuition, and the other torch was called reason. And she looked. In other words, logic and the feeling inside of yourself that tells you that this is right. Intuition, there's a feeling inside of myself that tells me this is right. And logic, reason. not superstition. Intuition means the act of knowing or sensing without the use of rational process. Knowledge gained by the use of this faculty. A perceptive insight, a sense of something not evident, an impression to look at, to contemplate. How do you contemplate? You look, you watch. And what are you watching? Yourself. That is intuition. And from this intuition comes reason and logic. You sit here and you listen to it, and we are able to provide documentation of the things that we talk about because it's logic. There is a belief among these people that Persephone was a symbol of the sun, which in the winter months lived below, and then in the summer months. And why was that? Because Persephone was lost, and Ceres was looking, and then Ceres came to the throne of Pluto, and she pled with him to let Persephone return to the light. And Pluto relented and said he would allow Persephone to live in the upper world half of the year, but then she would have to come and return into the darkness of Hades for the remaining half of the year. You can be up in the spring, but in the winter you come to me. And they said that all the flowers and all the shrubs and all the trees, they loved Persephone so much that when she had to leave and go back with Pluto, they would just die into the earth. And they would cry, and the leaves would fall from the trees, and the flowers would lose their blossoms, and they were so broken because Persephone. But that was not the true meaning of the mystery. That was the lesser mystery. Oh, you know that. What I said to you, what could it be? She had to go below 6 months, and then she could be up. Oh, you say, well, that's winter and summer. Persephone down with Pluto represents the winter. Up in the earth represents the summer. That's the season. You understood the lesser mystery. You get a little silver badge. Now you got to go for your gold badge, because in Eleusinian there was a greater mystery, and they say, now what's the real truth? What are we talking about here? And we're not talking about winter and fall, summer. We're talking about something much deeper than winter and summer. It was like the parable of Jesus, isn't it? Persephone being taken by Pluto down to the underworld for 6 months and then released into a higher place for 6 months. It looks like winter and summer. But the mystery was talking about the human soul. It's talking about you, the feelings that you have, even the feelings that you've been going through in your head while you're sitting here and I'm babbling up here, right as you're staring at me, the feelings that have been running through your head. I know I get about 20 seconds of your time. Then you go off and you entertain yourself for a couple minutes, then you come back and give me another 20 seconds. I understand that. I realize that. But you know, even while I'm talking and you're off having an adventure somewhere, I'm still hitting your subconscious. So I mean, some of the seeds that I'm throwing out here are still flopping down on the ground. I know, I realize. And you should see your face with your expression when some of you are looking. You know, you look right through. But that's fine. Because you're still, even though you're not hearing me, the true you inside is hearing me. And I understand that. So in about 5 minutes, I will give you the opportunity to run out of here. So this thing then, the feelings that you have which are deep inside of you, that which is constantly being pulled down into the darkness, has to be constantly elevated back up into the light. What goes on inside of you and what goes on in the universe? It's the same thing. The light that you are, that came from above, descended into this realm of illusion and assumed this veil of unreality. And then when you were born, you had all of these people who were part of this cult, the human cult, ready to take you and make sure that you grew up to to understand like them and to have traditional values. Their values. And you know what that amounts to. And then if you're really good and you have their values completely, you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't run around with girls, you don't go to Atlantic City. Every Wednesday night you go to some church and you eat ziti, and then you die, and it's all you've ever known. I had ziti with the pastor. And then you're 100 years old and laying, or 80 years old laying in a box. It's a good person. It was an ant. And somebody stepped on it. And it made as much difference to the world. It accomplished nothing. It stirred nothing. It stimulated nothing. It objected to nothing. It just followed the king ant or the queen bee, and it made honey and served it on Wednesday night with ziti. What a waste. 80 years of nothing. And you just think to yourself, and I think of myself, how long have you been here on the earth? What did you do? What have you done? That's right, Mark. It is funny when you think about it. Absolutely fakakta, nothing, except run around. Run around trying to survive so you could stay here another 20 years and do nothing. Okay? And so we missed it. Did we miss something? I mean, do they have the Alps and Hawaii and all of these great things and comets and just so we could do here and do nothing? Get 6 jobs and so you can pay the guy for the gas and all of this, and that's it. We missed it. The light descended into unreality, and when you arrived, religion was here to take you by the hand and lead you deeper and deeper and deeper into unreality. In other words, religion was here to take you to the throne of Pluto. Now, let me tell you something. When these people in Eleusis, and maybe one day, if everything goes well, you'll come here one night. Listen very carefully. Maybe one day, if everything goes well, you'll come here one night. But they were given into an initiation called the 9 days. And the 9 days were to symbolize the 9 months of gestation inside the womb, which was preparing for entrance into the lower world, connecting with the 9 spheres of light that you descended through during your process of assuming bodily form. Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mercury, and the moon. 9 of them, 9 months inside the 9 steps. That's why number 9, So the lesser mysteries followed man into the world of illusion in which we are all trapped by the physical. And the greater mysteries referred to spiritual regeneration, finding your invisible self. And whenever you started your mystery and your initiation, and you had come up into the point of light, you would say, Conks, Pax. Om being the movement through the 7. Pax being peace. And Conks, the movement through the 7 to peace, the movement through the 7 spheres, the movement through the 7 steps, the movement upward to this place of peace. I just want to look at one last thing, and then I promise you, we go. I just want to look at the depth of the mystery as it related to 6 months in the lower realms for Persephone with Pluto, and then 6 months above in the light. The Eleusinians taught that the soul, or light as we know it, either left the body during sleep or was capable of leaving during sleep. When you go to bed at night and you go to sleep, your body stays, and many times you leave because you have other things to do and other beings and other light to come. Persephone, which is the light within you, would remain as queen of Pluto's realm during the waking hours. Now, the waking hours for you is now. The sleeping hours is tonight. The waking hours for the earth is spring and summer. The sleeping hours is fall and winter. And then, of course, that measures itself as you go up into this universe. In the same way, as the natural process allows for this, and in the way that light leaves the body where it can no longer be controlled at death, the human being, you, had an opportunity to deliberately move that light to a place outside of the body to be refreshed and receive attachment to the mother light. You have that opportunity. Would you like to do that? You haven't a clue. That's why you're staring at me. But one day when I say, so we understand two curious Bible statements, okay? Yeah, I know. The two curious Bible statements in 2 Corinthians are, I am willing to be absent from the body and present with the Lord. Are you? And then in 2 Corinthians 12:2, I can't tell whether out of body such a one was caught up to the third heaven. In both instances, we are seeing Persephone leaving the confines of the lower Plutonian kingdom and ascending to the place of light. Now, I'm just going to leave this with you. When a person went through this and reached that point that maybe one day, depends on you if you want to go. When that person, they were called E-P-O-P-T-E-S. Okay? Epoptis. All right? It means one who sees directly. Sees what? That was the name of the person. Now, the activity, and this is an Aletheia, the activity that the Epoptis took part in was called autopsy. What? You're doing an autopsy? How could it be? What does the word mean? It means examination of a cadaver, examination of a dead body to determine or confirm the cause of death, a seeing for oneself. So then meditation, or functioning through the pineal, watching oneself to collapse the wave function, was actually seeing into a dead body to confirm the death, that one might correct the course and rise to life. Meditation is an autopsy. Because of the fact that it is the body which is the death, the light which is the life, and we look inside that which is dead to resurrect it into that which is life. And so there was the Epoptis who took part in the autopsy in the ancient Eleusinian mysteries of light. Yes?
You have the word auto in there.
Yes.
So.
So. Well, and these words come. It's very interesting when you start looking at the Greek and where these words came from. But the point that I wanted to tell you was the fact was that what they're saying here is that the light coming in comes into the world of death until we resurrect it back to life. And so that meditation or the funneling of looking into oneself was actually the same as a doctor does looking inside of a dead body. And he's looking inside of death to determine the cause. Why are you dead? What is the cause of that? And how can that be corrected? And so you look inside, you do an autopsy on yourself to confirm and learn how to change and move yourself out of that which is the lower death up into that which is the higher life. So, you tell your friends, we don't meditate on Tuesday nights. We do autopsies. Oh! Isn't it curious, though? Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting how they take something like that 2,000-3,000 years ago and say when you start looking inside of yourself, you're doing an autopsy. You're looking into that which is dead to confirm the cause of death, so now you can live. Thank you very much, and we'll see you.